Here we go. Get cozy. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from tonight? I'd love to imagine our Longhouse filled with listeners from every corner of the map, drifting off together by the glow of the hearth. Imagine walking up a gentle slope of wind-brushed grass toward a structure that seems to rise out of the earth itself. From a distance, it looks almost like a ship that has come to rest on land. Long, slightly curved, with a roof that flows in an even sweep from gable to gable. As you come closer, you notice how the walls bow subtly outward, how the eaves hang low against the weather, and how the whole building feels anchored, steady, and sure. This is the Viking Longhouse, the centre of a farm, the frame around a family's life, and the backdrop to nearly everything that mattered. Food, work, story, law, and rest, held together beneath one sheltering roof. Builders chose the site with care. The house needed to stand on ground that drained well after rain, close enough to water for animals and people, but not so close that flood or sea spray could gnaw at the foundations. It should face the wind in a way that helped the smoke pull out and the doorways stay usable in winter storms. In many places, the doors opened along the long side so that people stepped into the main aisle, rather than trying to fight the weather at the gable. The plan was simple to sketch in the soil. A long rectangle, soft at the corners, the proportions guided by experience rather than by ruler. Wide enough for stools and benches on each side and a central space down the middle where the hearth would live. The path would run and most of the daily movement would flow. The skeleton of the building was timber, straight trunks for posts, seasoned beams for the roof frame, and a ridge that ran the length like a spine. Carpenters set 2 lines of sturdy posts into the ground or onto sills so that the interior became 3 gentle aisles, side aisles for benches, storage and sleeping, and a central aisle for the fire, cooking, craftwork and passage. This 3-aisled structure gave the roof remarkable strength. Heavy tie beams and rafters met at the ridge, and the weight travelled down into the earth. In wet, windy climates, the builders favoured slightly curved walls, the famous boat shape, because those curves shed wind better and helped the roof carry snow. The skin of the house changed with the landscape. In forests, walls might be panels of wattle and daub, woven hazel or willow, plastered with a mixture of clay, straw and dung that dried to a tough, warm surface. In regions with ample stone, low stone footings lifted the timbers out of damp. Where trees were scarce, like Iceland and Greenland, thick turf blocks cut from the meadow became bricks, stacked in interlocking courses that kept heat in and noise out. A turf wall could be as thick as a person's arm is long, with a soft, living outer face that greened in summer and held its shape under winter frost. Roofs matched the walls. Thatch of reed or straw lay deep and tight, overlapping wooden shingles where good timber and a patient hand were available, or turf laid over birch bark, the bark acting as a waterproof sheet and the turf as an insulating blanket. Ropes of twisted withes and clever wooden pegs kept everything married to the frame when storms came hard off the sea. From inside, the structure revealed its logic. Massive posts marched down the room, their surfaces darkened over the years by smoke that rose from the hearth and drifted under the ridge. The fire did not sit under a chimney. Instead, the heat and smoke learned the paths in the roof and found their way out through vents and gaps in the eaves. The effect was practical magic. Beams were preserved by the smoke, insects were discouraged, and meat hung up high could cure slowly and safely. On some days, when the wind fell still or suddenly changed, the room would haze and eyes would water. On most days, the smoke threaded upward and outward, and the Longhouse kept its comfortable breathing rhythm. Floors were simple and robust. A packed earth floor handled thousands of footfalls without complaint, easy to sweep and easy to renew with a fresh tamping of clay. In wealthier homes, planks might form walkways along the benches or by storerooms to keep feet out of winter damp. A raised threshold at the doorway kept drafts low and snow outside. Pegs and rails ran along the walls so that tools, cloaks and harnesses could be hung neatly and quickly to hand. Light came in limited doses, open doors on bright days, small slits or covered openings where the wind allowed it, and the warm reach of tallow or fish oil lamps, their flames cradled in stone or iron. The dimness was by design. It protected stored food and textiles, guarded the eyes in winter, and made the glow of the hearth feel like a true centre. The scale of a longhouse said something about the people who lived within. Many farmhouses ran 15 to 25 metres from end to end, long enough to hold a family, their storerooms, and sometimes their animals in a byre at one end where the body heat of cattle could help warm the house. Some halls were larger still, built by chieftains who needed space for feasts, legal gatherings, and the display of wealth and generosity. In such halls, the rooms stretched so far that you could stand at one gable and see the other swimming in the wavering light, benches lining the walls like long wooden shores, shields and spears hanging in ordered ranks, and a high seat, more than a chair really, a declared place, framed by carved posts that told of ancestry and authority. The building methods were a conversation with the environment. If a farm lay in birch country, you saw birch bark under the roof. If the shore offered reeds, you saw reed thatch combed and bound in crisp courses that turned rain like a bird's feathers. If the land held good clay, you felt the dense, dry warmth of well-made daub in winter. Even the fastener spoke of place. Wooden tree nails driven tight through mortices, strips of walrus hide or twisted roots where iron was scarce, iron nails where trade routes were strong. Every joint recorded a choice: how to brace against the gales, how to let summer air wander low along the floor, how to give the roof enough pitch to shrug off snow without wasting height or timber. Because the longhouse was both home and workplace, its form served many needs at once. Space had to be open enough for a loom set up in the side aisle, for a trestle table to appear at mealtimes and vanish afterward, for barrels, chests and sacks to sit in orderly rows where damp could not reach them. Doors needed to be wide enough for carcasses to be brought in for butchering, yet snug enough against winter wind. Storage lofts tucked under the eaves turned volume into pantry. Niches for lamps turned posts into little lighthouses at night. The same bench could host a guest at supper, cradle a child to sleep, and in the morning serve as a work surface to mend a net or cut pegs for a new sled. If you listened to the house, you heard its engineering. Rafters creaked softly as the weather changed. Pegs settled in their sockets as the thatch drank rain. The ridge beam hummed in a hard blow, like a string pulled tight across the room. These sounds were not warnings, but intimacies. They told the people inside that the structure was moving as it should, flexing, breathing, partnering with the wind rather than resisting it to the point of failure. When maintenance was due, the house gave signs: a drip at an eave after a particular wind, a draught by a threshold, a spot on a beam where the smoke no longer clung. Repairs were part of the seasonal calendar. New thatch in late summer, turf blocks patched while the ground still cut clean, birch bark renewed when stores allowed. In some regions, one end of the longhouse blended into a byre so that animals shared the roof in winter. The logic was elegant. People and animals benefited from each other's warmth. Fodder could be moved under cover, and a single roof simplified maintenance during the hardest months. In other places, especially where space allowed or smell was a concern, byres stood just beside the main house, connected by sheltered paths so that work could continue when storms swept across the fields. The exact arrangement was not fixed. Rather, it was tuned by climate, by the number of animals, by the wealth of the farm, and by custom handed down in a place. Symbols embedded in the building reminded everyone of law and belonging. Carved high seat pillars might carry patterns of knots or beasts, and some families spoke of these posts as companions with their own protective spirit. The threshold itself had meaning, a line that hospitality invited strangers to cross, and that householders defended when danger threatened. The roof protected more than bodies and goods, it protected honour. A slander spoken under that roof could become a legal issue. An oath sworn by the fire was binding. The physical house and the social house were woven together, each giving the other shape. Regional variations tell the same story in different dialects. In Norway's wetter valleys, wooden shingles shed rain in fine scales. Along Denmark's lowlands, reed thatch lay heavy and tight. On Iceland's treeless lava fields, turf walls with stone footings rose thick and quiet, roofs mounded with living green. In all these places the house reached for the same goals: warmth, durability, space to work and gather, expressed with the materials close at hand. Even at the edges of the Norse world the logic travelled. Thick sod over birch bark in Greenland, robust turf and wood hybrids in the Faroes, timber and turf together where each alone would be insufficient. The Longhouse was not a single design stamped on the land. It was a language of solutions, spoken with a local accent wherever people set it down. To step inside on a winter evening was to be held by a deliberate geometry. The central hearth lined up with the ridge above. The posts framed sight lines so that anyone entering could see the high seat and the welcoming stretch of benches. The length of the room allowed work, rest and storage to flow without hard partitions, but small screens and textiles softened corners into privacy and made it possible for different tasks to share the same air without colliding. The house organised time as well as space. Morning began by coaxing embers into flame. Midday gathered people at the board. Night drew them back to the benches, listening to the wind test the roof while the room settled around the last coals. Even when empty, the Longhouse told you what it was for. You could see the talc-like polish where countless hands had worn smooth a post near the door. You could find the shallow groove in the floor where the table's trestle feet had bitten year after year. You could smell the story of it: resin in the timbers, the sweet ghost of smoke in the thatch, a lingering trace of wool, leather, and dried herbs. These were not decorations, they were the residue of living. The way a riverbank shows the flow that shaped it. A Longhouse was a machine for life, tuned over generations to convert weather into shelter, labour into goods, and gatherings into memory. When people speak of the Viking Age, they often picture ships, shields, and the open sea. But for most hours of most lives, everything began and ended here, within walls designed to welcome work and withstand weather, beneath a roof that learned how to breathe with the wind, upon a floor that knew every foot in the household. The Longhouse was not just where people slept. It was where they became a family, a farm, a community, and a name carried forward. The first thing you notice is the sound, a low steady hush of flame breathing through dry wood, the soft crumble of embers as they settle, a single pop when a pocket of resin lets go. The hearth is the house's heartbeat, a long ribbon of fire laid down the centre aisle where warmth, light and cooking all gather at once. Even before dawn, someone is up with a small bundle of kindling, kneeling to coax yesterday's banked coals back into a living flame. Ash has kept them sleeping through the night, smothered enough to slow their hunger, alive enough to spark at the first whisper from a straw twist and a patient breath. Around this first flare of orange, the Longhouse changes personality. Shadows loosen, the air stirs, and the room remembers how to work. Fuel is chosen the way a farmer chooses seed, carefully by habit and season. Birch catches easily and burns bright. Oak gives slower, heavier heat. Pine spits now and then, all pitch and perfume. In regions where trees are scarce, peat blocks dried and stacked on summer days smoulder, with a deep, even glow that lasts and lasts. Driftwood rolls in from distant coasts carrying the salt of other seas. Juniper branches perfume the air when there's something to celebrate, or simply when a careful hand wants to sweeten the smoke. A good house keeps more than one kind of fuel at the ready. Quick-burning sticks bring the fire to life. Dense logs hold its backbone. A handful of dry chips brings up a cooking heat without wasting the larger pieces. No flame is casual here. Every stick has a purpose, and every ember is accounted for. Look at the way the hearth is built. A shallow trench lined with stones that have learned to love heat. A bed of compacted earth hardened by years of use. Perhaps a low curb to keep coals from wandering. Iron pot hooks hang from a beam or from an adjustable trammel chain that can raise and lower a cauldron at the smallest whim. The difference between a simmer and a boil. A flat stone or iron griddle leans near the edge for breads. Thin rounds slapped on when the fire runs hottest. Fire dogs and tongs, a poker, a wooden paddle for ash, a bucket of water or sand within easy reach. It's all there, arranged the way a hand expects to find it even in half light. The hearth is a tool chest made of fire, and with it the day takes shape. Porridge first, then a pot of milk warming to become skyer or cheese, then a stew that will sit and rise and fall with the heat until evening. All light in the Longhouse begins with this blaze. Without glass windows and with openings kept small to defend against weather, daylight is a narrow visitor. People time their tasks to the sun, spinning closer to the door at midday, moving inward as the pale northern light leans away. As dusk thickens, lamps wake along the walls. They are simple and clever, shallow bowls of soapstone or iron, a lip to support a wick of twisted plant fibre, moss or wool, and a mouthful of tallow, fish oil, or, in seafaring places, whale oil. Each lamp is a quiet star. It does not shout the way a bonfire does. It steadies work with a local glow. You can read a carving's grain by it, count stitches, thread a bone needle, and still feel your eyes at rest. Fuel is precious, so flames are trimmed to a calm tear shape. Bright enough to help, small enough to last. In a house that lives by season and supply, light itself is husbanded like grain. Watch the smoke and you see how the building thinks. There is no chimney to grab and funnel the exhaust. Instead, the house has learned a slower conversation with air. Heat lifts the smoke and piles it up under the roof, where it drifts and thins and finds the paths out, through a vent at the ridge, through loosened seams in thatch, through patient gaps at the eaves. On most days, it layers itself like a low cloud far above the benches, painting the rafters black and keeping insects shy. Meat hung high cures in that protective haze, fish fillets turn glossy and safe, and even the joinery benefits. Smoke slows the work of rot, and lends the wood a resin-dark skin that can last for decades. When the wind turns awkward, a draught may shove the cloud down and the room will sting for a while. Then someone nudges a door, lifts a vent board, or shifts the trammel chain to alter the heat's pull, and the balance returns. Every house has its own sweet spots, door angles, vent slivers, seating places, known by the people who live there the way a captain knows his deck. Making fire is a skill woven into the day. Steel striker and flint kiss to throw a spark. The spark burrows into charred cloth or the soft felt of amadou, the tinder made from fungus, until it glows like a tiny coal. Breath nurses it to flame in a bundle of dry grass or shredded bark. Children learn early to respect it. They fetch kindling, watch how ash mutes a coal without killing it, learn the difference between a lively cooking bed and the slow comfort of night heat. There's a rhythm to tending that seems like idleness to an outsider. A poke here, a turned log there, a thoughtful pause while the fire answers back. You can't hurry flame, you negotiate with it, and the house rewards patience with steadiness. Cooking is more than filling stomachs, it's the daily chemistry of the home. A cauldron hung over the bright centre becomes the calendar of the day, barley swelling until it breaks and softens, cabbage, leeks, and herbs riding up through the steam, cuts of fish or meat slipping in and out as appetite and supply allow. A smaller pot warms drink. A lidded vessel can bake in embers as gently as an oven would. Root cakes and little cheeses nestle like eggs in a nest of coals. Soapstone pots are patient. They hold heat long after they leave the hook, letting food finish in a mild, even warmth that doesn't scorch. When there's cause for celebration, a spit is rigged and fat maps bright paths down into the ash, while someone with a wooden ladle baptizes the turning piece in its own juices. Smoke flavours everything, not as a heavy mask, but as a thread that ties winter to summer, the house to the field and shore. The fire's work carries beyond warmth and meals. Wet boots lean near the hearth with their mouths open like quiet frogs. Snowmelt weeps out and is gone. Nets come in from the shore to dry in the upper air. Peeled rods for basketry rest in the rafters until they're ready to bend to a maker's will. Freshly dyed yarn, madder red, weld yellow, woad blue where trade has been kind, hangs to fix its colour. At the edge of the hearth, a little iron pan becomes a toolmaker's companion for heating pitch, straightening a bent nail, softening horn. Even medicine leans into the flame. A poultice warmed just to the point where it comforts a sore joint. A stew fortified with onions and garlic to fight winter's cough. The hearth is the workshop's assistant, the weaver's ally, the healer's silent partner. Air quality is managed with the same practical sense that shapes every other choice. There's a habit of sweeping ash to the edges to keep the middle clean and reflective of heat, of lifting sleeping furs to shake out the day's fine soot, of cracking a door at night to let the breath of the house exchange with the breath of the world. Not every day is gentle. Eyes may water, a throat may catch, but the benefits are plain. Insect numbers fall in the smoky season. Stores mould less. Wooden spoons, pegs, and bowls harden in the warm, dry air. People learn where to sit for comfort. The low draught along the floor in summer, the high, still warmth at shoulder height in winter. On truly still nights, a thin blue thread pools and makes halos around the lamps. On windy ones, the smoke pours cleanly upward, and the rafters gleam as if freshly polished. Light has its own etiquette. You don't set every lamp burning when one will do. The nearest tasks come to the light rather than sending light to every corner. A loom is angled to catch both the hearth's glow and the small lamp on a bracket behind it. A reader of runes or a teller of accounts takes the high seat where firelight falls longest. When travellers come in late and shaking off sleet, a lamp is brought to meet them halfway, not only to guide their steps, but to show respect. Come in, the house is awake for you. On long winter afternoons, people learn to love penumbra, the gentle edges where shadow is not yet night, and to fall asleep by the slow arithmetic of embers fading, a more patient clock than any bell. There's a quiet economy circle around the ash heap. Nothing from the hearth is merely thrown away. Ash mixed with water makes a mild lye that can help in soap making. Scattered on icy thresholds, it gives grip. Sprinkled thinly in the latrine pit, it sweetens the air and speeds the earth's work. Ash tucked into a clay jar keeps tinder bone dry. Charred ends of larger logs, set aside, become tomorrow's quick fire starters. Even the soot on the rafters has a job. Paint pigment when mixed with fat or egg. A stain that tells a carver where the smoke truly travels so vents can be tuned with a sure hand. Because fire is both blessing and risk, customs grow around it like guardrails. No one steps over the hearth without a word. Tools aren't left jutting where a robe can catch. A child's first close chore is to carry a lid for the lamp, to learn how a flame bows and goes willingly under a calm hand. At night the fire is banked with care. Coals drawn together like a sleeping animal, a blanket of ash laid over, a finger's space left here and there for breath. Someone always takes one last look, listens for the bright chatter that means too much air, or the dull hush that means the coals may smother completely. In deep winter, the last action before lying down is this quiet pact with the embers. In the morning, the first action is to wake them gently and begin again. Rituals live at the edge of the flame, a drop of ale flicked into the coals before the cup is raised, a morsel shared with the household spirits whose names are said with affection, an oath spoken in the presence of the fire because fire remembers. Even when new beliefs arrive and a cross is set near the high seat, the old instincts remain. gather at the warm place. Tell the truth where everyone can see your face in the same light. Share heat with the stranger before you ask a question. The house's law is written in warmth and visibility. Here is where we settle. Here is where we forgive. Here is where we feast when there is reason. And here is where we accept the long, dark months with a flame we tend together. On nights when snow hushes the world outside, the hearth reveals its gentlest art. The Longhouse becomes a quiet lantern on the land, low, smoky shore. The beam ends creak a little, satisfied with their burden. Lamps trace small circles on wool and wood. The fire's core narrows to a slow, red river with bright islands where knots are still giving up their heat. Someone stirs the pot and tastes. Someone else lifts a lamp to check the yarn drying on its peg. A dog sighs and resettles in the warm draught along the floor. The day keeps folding into the same centre, and the centre keeps answering with light. In the morning it will all begin again, and the house will remember how to breathe. If you stand just inside the doorway and let your eyes adjust, the house reveals itself as a map drawn in warmth and habit. The central aisle runs like a slow river from one gable to the other, bordered by two raised banks of benches along the long walls. Everything flows along this spine: people, food, tools, stories. The hearth sits in the middle of the aisle, long and low, so heat can spread evenly left and right. On either side, the benches are more than seats. They're platforms for work by day and beds by night. Stages for meal boards at supper, and shelves for chests pushed back under them when space is tight. The bench fronts are often faced with smooth boards to keep drafts low, and behind them small storage cubbies swallow the endless parade of household things that make a farm run. The house is one room only in the way a forest is one place. Invisible lines divide it into zones, and every regular hand knows where those lines lie. Closest to the door is the threshold zone, a layer between world and home. Wet cloaks find their pegs. Boots and shoes line up along a low rack so that mud doesn't walk itself further in. A water bucket sits just inside, part courtesy for the traveller, part fire safety, part convenience for cooking. Its ladle tied on a thong so it never goes missing. This entry is also where small talk lives. Quick talk with a neighbour delivering news, a trader showing a sample, a child reporting on the animals. To cross inward from here is to step into the household's rhythm. Past the initial bustle and nearer the hearth, the room widens into the work and warmth zone. Here the furniture moves with the hour. Trestle legs and planks become a long table, then vanish after eating so looms can breathe and tools can spread out. A warp-weighted loom stands in the side aisle where it can drink the best of the light and heat without courting sparks. Its weighted stones make a soft pendulum music when the weaver beats the weft. A shaving horse and a low carving bench live against a post, ready for bone, antler, or wood. Above, iron hooks and pegs turn the rafters into a hanging pantry. Cured fish, bundles of herbs, a coil of rope, a child's cradle slung where draughts can't reach it, and the slow warmth rises steady as breath. At one long wall, midway down the house, is the high seat, less a throne than a declaration. It's a sturdy spot with a wide backboard, sometimes flanked by carved pillars that carry memory in their patterns, knots, beasts, or traces of a family story. Facing the room, it governs the social layout. On feast nights, the honoured places fall near it. On ordinary evenings, it becomes the best lamplit corner for reading a tally stick or telling a tale. The high seat anchors the order zone, a place for law within the home. Disputes cooled here, agreements witnessed in the clear light of the hearth, and oaths given a weight they would not have in the yard. Between the high seat and the hearth there's room to turn, a practical dance floor for the daily choreography. This is the traffic lane, and its edges are kept clear by habit. No chest remains here for long, no basket sits where a rush to the doorway could kick it over. When a pot needs to be carried, when a sheep must be led through in winter, When a neighbour staggers in under a sack of barley, this lane proves its worth. Even the dogs learn it. They sleep tucked under benches, noses in paws, leaving the lane open. Along the benches, privacy grows out of textiles and scents. A woolen hanging can make a nook without stealing air. A patterned strip of cloth turns a sleeping place into a small room when eyes are tired of being everywhere at once. These curtains also shape sound, catching the clack of a loom or the whisper of a lamp's wick so the whole house doesn't have to be awake for one person's task. A family can split the side aisles into zones: a children's corner with smooth wooden toys and a low chest of clothes, an elder's corner with soft furs, a lamp bracket of its own, and a seat high enough that knees don't protest when it's time to stand. Storage is a landscape of heights. On the floor but off the drafts, heavy chests hold winter clothes, festival garments, and valued tools. Lids can be locked. Keys hang from the woman of the house's belt with authority that needs no words. Above shoulder level, lighter things claim their kingdom: baskets with spindles and wool, dried apples, a pouch with the family weights and measures. Higher still, in the sky shelf under the rafters, live the things that tolerate smoke and time: seed barley sealed in bags, spare yolks, a sled's long runners waiting for snow. The house learns what to keep close and what to keep safe, and the rafters become a memory palace where each item has a season to descend. Light has its own map. By day, the brightest patch rides the door and the small, carefully placed wall slits. Tasks that demand keen eyes migrate to those sun pools. An anvil scale repair or fine needlework takes the doorway half step. Daunting accounts wait until midday when the light is kind. At dusk, lamps translate light into pockets. One hangs near the loom, one by the high seat, one over the main workbench. A hand knows where a flame will throw a shadow, and angles the task to avoid it. The result is a constellation of usable islands, with dark water between where bodies can pass and rest without glare. Where animals share the roof, the byre end forms a world of its own. A low timber wall with gaps, or even just a change in floor height, marks the line between human and animal zones. Mangers run along the outer wall. A central gutter keeps wet where wet belongs and sweet straw where it should be. In winter wind, a door to the yard opens straight to this space so fodder can come in under cover. At night, the animals' breathing becomes the slow percussion of the house, and their warmth eases the work of the hearth. A raised walkway along the human side lets a person tend beasts without stepping into muck, and a swinging lamp above makes sure no halter is adjusted in the dark by guesswork alone. The smell is present but managed: fresh straw layered, dung forked out on a rhythm, ash sprinkled when needed to sweeten things and discourage flies. Tucked away from the direct heat but not far from it is the quiet craft corner. Here sit the quern stones on a stable block of timber or packed earth. The lower stone is heavy and still, the upper stone turns with a wooden handle, and grain becomes flour with a sound like distant rain. A dye pot has its own shelf and a set of rules: no set downs that would stain, clean water ready, mordants kept stoppered and marked. The boneworking kit, saws, scrapers, drills, hangs together on a peg rail so nothing wanders when a project is midstream. This corner doubles as the small surgery when needed, because it has both light and a seat that can be leaned against. A box of simple salves and herbs occupies a high niche where children's hands cannot reach without a stool. Near the hearth, but not crowding it, a semicircle of floor is left clear on purpose, the hot work apron. Here hot pots can be moved to a trivet, bread can be turned, kindling can be sorted without tripping. Nobody naps here, nobody stores anything with a long handle here. It stays open so the cook can dance in and out without apology. Behind that apron is the cool shelf, shaded by a hanging cloth and set low to the packed earth where the temperature is kinder. Butter rests there. A clay jar keeps milk sweet a little longer. A small lidded tub holds what must be kept away from the dog's opinion. Weapons and tools have their own etiquette. Spears and shields hang high and out of reach. not because anyone fears them, but because a dropped spear point in a crowded room are poor companions. Everyday blades live lower, a seax in a sheath on a beam hook, a small knife by the cutting board, a draw knife at the shaving horse. The blacksmith's heavier tools are usually kept in the smithy, but hammers and files migrate back and forth and therefore have an assigned peg near the door to be borrowed and returned without fuss. A house where tools live somewhere definite is a house that doesn't lose time looking for them. Sound is zoned as carefully as anything else. The looms beat, the querns hush, the low gossip at the benches, the children's clatter, they each have a time and a place. After supper, when lamps are lit and the day's heavy work is done, the story lane opens, a clear band of space where a storyteller can pace slowly while the room listens, the fire throwing hands into silhouette when the tale requires a monster or a god. On winter mornings, before the embers surge and the frost has fully retreated from the door, the house keeps a quiet hour by tradition. Tasks that creak or bang wait, and soft chores, mending, wool-teasing, peg-whittling, take precedence so babies and elders can enjoy the last of their sleep. Season changes redraw the map without moving a wall. In summer, the door stands open and the outside room swallows half the work. Dyeing moves to a sheltered yard, hide-scraping lives downwind. The quern may roll closer to the doorway to let dust blow out. Benches serve more as staging areas for baskets headed out to the fields. In winter, the house pulls its edges inward. Screens go up earlier. The lamp constellation thickens. Storage bins creep closer to hand. The buyer end becomes more intimate as animals spend longer hours inside. The same space, two different households, both fluent with the same grammar of heat and reach. Paths exist for night navigation. From bench to door, from door to hearth, from hearth to buyer, there's a known route a person can walk almost blindfolded. The backs of fingers grazing the bench edge here, a knee brushing a post there, one extra step to avoid the place where the floor dips slightly from years of footfall. A small lamp on a bracket by the high seat is left with its wick just alive, the house's nightlight. If someone wakes coughing or a child needs water, the route unfolds like a remembered song. Not everything useful is visible. Under a bench, a shallow pit lined with planks can serve as a cool cache for perishables. The lid disguised as another board. A narrow trench, filled with smooth stones and covered, runs from the wash basin toward the yard to keep dishwater from pooling where feet want to be in winter. A bundle of rushes stands near the door for floor strewing on muddy days, swapped out and composted before they sour. Even the air has channels, a small, adjustable board at the eave to bleed out smoke in a particular wind, a leather flap over a wall slit to redirect a draft, a vent box near the buyer that lets odours escape without drawing warmth from the main room. People too have zones that shift with age and role. The head of household commands the high seat domain when duty calls. On ordinary days, that same corner is shared ground for anyone with fine work needing the best lamp. A foster child might own the small cupboard with his or her name mark on it, an island of self in a sea of shared goods. Thralls and hired hands sleep toward the cooler end or in a loft nook. Guests are placed where the house can honour them and keep them comfortable. Near the fire's long side, with a screen and a fur, and with a clear path to the door should an early departure be necessary. The keys at the woman's belt translate into a zone of command around stores and textiles. Questions about provisions travel to her side of the benches as naturally as smoke to the ridge. There is also a little altar without a name, a shelf that looks like any other until you notice how people treat it. A carved token, a ring, a small cross, a sprig of evergreen in winter. This corner marks the household's conversation with the unseen. It stays clear of clutter. A lamp can be moved there when needed, not for show, but because light belongs with words that matter. When the family gathers to speak of a wedding, a journey, a boundary dispute, they stand partly in that zone and partly in the law of the high seat, letting both spaces lend weight. Over years, the layout becomes almost instinct. A child who can barely lift a lamp knows which peg it returns to. A guest asked to sit by the loom understands which bench is meant without being shown. If the loom is down because the season demands full attention outdoors, the empty space becomes a summer sleeping nook or an indoor threshing patch for a day when a sudden storm interrupts the yard work. The house is elastic without ever feeling vague. Its borders are soft because its habits are strong, and always the posts keep time. They frame the lanes, carry the roof, and hold the memory of every change the family has made to the plan. Fingers have polished them where hands pause on the way from one zone to the next. Soot has drawn faint halos where lamps most often hang. Knife nicks, tally marks, a child's scratched animal. These are the house's quiet cartography. Stand in the centre and turn slowly. You can feel the map under your feet. Warmth marks the heart. Order seats itself where eyes can meet. Work arranges itself where reach and light agree. Stores retreat to the shadows where cool lives, and sleep gathers along the edges where the world presses least. One room, many rooms, all of them stitched together by the same thread. The path from door to fire and back again. Begin with the people and the house explains itself. At its centre is the married pair who hold the keys, and the plough, the household heads whose partnership is more practical than ceremonial. He's the farm's outward face at the assembly and in dealings beyond the fence. She is the inward heart, steward of stores, textiles, and the rhythms that keep the room fed and the year solvable. The ring of iron or bronze keys at her belt is not decoration but jurisdiction. Chests open at her word. She tallies grain, weighs wool, allocates lamp fat and salt, and decides which cloth is for trade and which for kin. When he's away with the boat or the drove, her word is law from bench to byre, and no one finds this curious. The roof does not keep its shape on one beam alone. Around them gathers a household large enough to be its own little world. Children, sons and daughters, sometimes fostered children from allied families, learn the house by touch and task. The youngest carry kindling, fetch water, and watch with wide eyes as an ember is teased into flame. A little older and they sweep rushes, card wool into soft clouds, grind barley at the quern until their arms find the patient rhythm. They practice knots, try their first stitches, read the weather from the door. There are rules, but they are mostly made of trust and imitation. A child learns where not to run because the hot work apron near the hearth is always clear. Learns which pegs are for knives and which for lamp lids. Learns to keep the traffic lane open because one day a neighbour will arrive carrying a body's worth of news and need that path without thinking. Elders hold a different authority, quieter and no less binding. Grandparents or an aged uncle may not swing a scythe as they once did, but they keep the long memory, boundaries and bargains, the kinship net that stretches valley to valley, the seasons when herring ran thick or hay failed and how the family survived. They are living archives of law and prudence. When a calf is born breech, the elders' hands go first because they remember how. When an insult at the assembly needs answering but not inflaming, an elder crafts the reply. At night they tell the household who it is in the only way that matters, by story, ancestor to ancestor, folly to lesson, as the rafters listen and keep the smoke. Between kin and elders stand those who work for hire and those who are unfree. Hired men and women come by season or year, paid in coin, cloth and winter shelter. They bring strength when haying crowds the horizon, when boats must be mended before the wind turns, when lambing demands more hands than the family can spare. Their names are spoken in the same breath as kin at mealtime. Their place at the bench is obvious by habit. Loyalty grows by fair pay, clear rules, and a place at the fire when tales are told. Then there are thralls, men and women without rights, whose labour and bodies belong to the household. Their work is hard and everywhere, mucking stalls, hauling water, tending fires, spinning to the ache. Some are born into bondage, some were taken in war or debt. Manumission is possible and known. A freed person takes a new place in the room, neither erasing the past nor bound by it forever. No one in the house forgets the difference between choice and compulsion, even if the difference goes largely unspoken. If the household is large, a chieftain's seat or a prosperous farm, roles branch further. A steward keeps the farm's calendar and accounts. A dairymaid rules the milk shed like a captain, turning milk to skyr, cream to butter, and watching the temperatures with the back of her hand better than any instrument. A head herdsman knows every animal by feel in the dark. The loom mistress decides when the warp will be set, what dye pots will be warmed, which pattern will speak at next spring's market. The blacksmith may not sleep under this roof if the forge stands apart for safety, but his tools live on assigned pegs, and his say carries weight when iron or weather is in question. The house is a school without a bell. The boy who will inherit the high seat is not taught only to strike hard. He learns to strike judiciously with words first, to keep tally sticks, to judge a beam's straightness by sight, to smell when fish is cured and not merely dried. The girl who will carry the keys learns to barter cloth and cheese with numbers in her head, to spot a leaking roof at a glance, to calm a frightened ewe, to make a guest feel rich with welcome even in a lean month. Both learn to count in ells and handfuls, to read the clean notches of a staff that remembers debts paid and owed, to mouth the beginnings of runes the way others mouth prayers, sound and meaning paired, not for letters alone but for marks on chests and blades, and the small messages that travel with trade. Authority is daily and seasonal, never merely ceremonial. In spring, the household head chooses when to turn the soil and when to hold back on account of a late frost. In summer, he counts oars and men and judges whether the fishing grounds or the market town will answer the year's needs better. In autumn, she becomes the strictest figure in the house, rationing salt and sweetness, dividing meat into feast, trade and hunger insurance, laying down rules about lamp oil that no one dares break. In winter, the two of them watch the store chests like sacred beasts. Their quiet calculations make the difference between a hungry month and a failing farm. There is nothing abstract about leadership here. A wrong decision can be tasted. Marriage is both alliance and work contract. The wedding feast lights the beams, yes, with horns lifted and vows sworn, yet its consequences measured in chores and permissions the very next morning. A woman arrives with a dowry, sometimes simple, sometimes rich, textiles, livestock, a chest with iron corners, and the promise of a morning gift from her husband that recognizes her stake in the union. Her keys ring differently now, a new pattern to the chests she may open. Without fuss, space is made on the benches. A loom's position shifts. A chest's corner becomes hers, the herb rack rearranged to fit the knowledge she brings with her. She learns the humours of this particular fire, and the weather that shoves smoke down, for every house breathes its own way. The man learns the names and tempers of her kin, because law rides invisible in those ties. Fosterage binds houses without ink. A son or daughter might be sent to another farm, kin or ally, to be raised and instructed, returning years later with new skills and loyalties that weave the communities tighter than any rope. The foster parent is honoured in speech and gift, and the child grows 2 homes instead of 1. In a world where feuds can emerge from pride as easily as from theft, such bonds are insurance and grace. They also widen the house's expertise. A foster child brings back a stitch unknown here, a better way to set a net, a song that calms cattle in a storm. Guests arrive as tests of reputation as much as bearers of news. A trader smells of salt and tar, a scald of cold and words. Both are met at the threshold with heat first, questions second. The woman of the house measures quickly, how much she can spare, what to hold back without insult. The man gauges the talk. Is the guest a straight teller, or will the tale grow teeth? Their decisions echo. Rumour is the snowball of the north, and one stingy night can roll into a bad winter of talk. A good host doesn't drown a traveller in plenty. He places the right meat in the right bowl, and the right person on the right bench. and he makes sure the horn passes fairly. An oath spoken by the hearth in such a moment is remembered long, and so is a lie. Discipline is plain and embedded in custom. Children are corrected more by the room than by a raised hand. The empty peg that should have held a knife, the wet footprint too far inside, the lampwick trimmed too short and smoking. Adults are corrected by stares, by silence, by the shift of a bench that says, "Not here tonight." Feuds are not fed by accident in a well-run house. Sharp words are cooled or postponed to the assembly, where witnesses stand and law speaks in full day. If a blow must be struck, the house does not pretend otherwise. The spear has its own peg because denial makes for sloppy danger. Religion, old, new, or blended, passes through the same human channels. Offerings are small and frequent. A drop for the housewhites, a whispered promise at the lamp shelf when a birth nears or a boat is late. With the cross comes a new calendar of fasts and saints, but the ethics feel familiar. Keep oaths, be generous, honour the dead, shield the guest. The woman who tends the stores now tends the poor box as well. The man who swore on a ring swears now on a book, and the oath bites just as deep. The house does not argue theology. It folds meaning into chores. Status reveals itself without trumpets. You can read it in the length of the benches, the quality of cloth in everyday wear, the depth of the lamp stock at the start of winter, the sweet fat smell of butter even on a weekday, the number of seasoned beams that do not creak when a gale sits on the roof. But you can also read it in quieter currencies, whether a freedman sits close to the fire, whether a hired girl is gifted good shoes in autumn, whether a returning neighbour with bad luck is given a job and a blanket without first explaining himself to death. In sagas and in life, generosity spends like gold and compounds like interest. When danger tests the door, leadership becomes visible as a shield. A watcher hears feet on the path at an hour when feet should sleep. Dogs lift their heads and do not bark yet. The household head stands, not shouting, and the room arranges itself around him. Spears come down, not all of them bright. The hearth poker looks suddenly like a weapon and is placed out of baby's reach. Someone banks the fire to a low glow, light enough to see, dark enough to keep the eyes true. A voice at the door calls a name or doesn't. Either way, the reply is measured. Most nights end with nothing but a shared look and a small laugh, the room's pulse returning to yarn and stew. A few become stories that will be told for years, where courage looked like patience and the best throw of the night was a door bar set just so. Birth and death happen within these same posts, each binding the house tighter to itself. A newborn is held to a knee to be claimed and sprinkled with water and words. Gifts pass, not large but laden with hope. The mother's domain swells outward as neighbours bring broth, as the keys move for a few days to another belt while strength returns. When someone dies, benches shift to make a vigil place, lamps are trimmed lower, stories lengthen and soften. The house learns new quiets. Decisions follow, what goods go with the body, how to divide tools and land so that the living can keep living peaceably. Here the woman's store counting and the man's law memory meet, and both feel the weight of being fair. If you want to see leadership without speeches, watch a scarcity. Late winter and the butter tub is sounding hollow, the barley bin low at the corners. The woman reduces lamp hours by a little, just enough to stretch oil without bringing gloom. Bread slices at supper grow a finger thinner, the stew grows more cabbage and less meat, but the spices are used more boldly to fool the tongue and comfort the mind. The man barters a spare sled runner for cod when a boat from the coast arrives, refusing to sell the last good rope though the price is fine, because spring will require it. Children are told the truth kindly. Hired hands are given options. A thrall is still fed. No one confuses prosperity with goodness here. Goodness is the art of getting everyone to spring. Honour in the house is not a flag on the roof. It is a set of habits that keep people willing to work side by side. Speak straight, don't boast, remember the names of those who helped, Make room at the fire when the door opens. Keep your tools in their place. Don't wake a sleeping child for a small thing, and when a large thing comes, be the first to your feet. In such a place, the Longhouse is more than timber, turf, and smoke. It is a covenant renewed every morning when the keys are lifted, the embers are breathed awake, and the door is unbarred to the day. The day begins with the tools already waiting in their places, as if the house itself has laid them out overnight. A knife hangs where the hand expects it, its edge kept honest on a whetstone that remembers every breakfast. Beside it, a bundle of wooden pegs, some smooth as beans from finger-turning, others fresh cut and still smelling of sap. The wooden pail knows the path to the well. The ashrake knows the hearth's temper. The quern knows the weight of barley by the way the handle pulls the shoulder. Nothing here is random. Each thing earns its keep, and each keeps the family moving. Woolwork is a season that never ends. Come spring, sheep are shore with careful two-hand shears, the fleece caught in one piece like a soft landscape. The raw wool is skirted and sorted at the bench, coarser locks for sturdy outerwear, the finer crimp for garments that will live close to skin. Some is washed, some left in the natural oils to weather the wet. Combing and carding begin at once. Iron combs and wooden cards tease and tame the fibres into a cloud that drafts smoothly. A distaff is dressed, a drop spindle spins. The rhythm takes over, twist, let the twist run, wind onto the cop. The spindle's quiet whir is the house's second heartbeat, following the fire. There's art in keeping the yarn even without watching, in feeling a slub before it forms and correcting it with a breath of fingers. When the cop fattens, the yarn is skeined and set aside, or plied for strength with another length that sings the same note. In winter, the great warp-weighted loom stands in the side aisle, warp stones dangling like a row of thoughtful faces. Threads climb from the stones to the beam, a forest of lines. A sword beater sets the weft. Pattern grows from memory. Herringbone, broken diamond, plain weave for speed and strength. The cloth's purpose is decided before the first heddle is knotted. Sail, cloak, blanket, trade. Dye pots bubble nearby when fuel and time allow. Weld yellow, madder red, birch leaf green, lichen purple coaxed by patience. Alum, bought dear or bartered, fixes the colour. Iron darkens it into storm shades when a sober cloth is wanted. A bath of urine, saved in a lidded tub for this very art, helps the dye bite and stay. Tablet-woven bands finish edges and become belts, straps, and the small pageantry of everyday dress. For socks and mittens, the older craft appears, null-binding looping yarn with a needle into dense, warm fabric that laughs at wind. Wood shapes life the way bread shapes a day. Axes come in families. A broad axe to hew the face of a beam true, a lighter axe to limb, a hatchet to split kindling and whisper joints into being. The adze cleans a plank to a soft fairness. The draw knife hums at the shaving horse, curling strips that fall fragrant on the floor. There is a joy in a good mortise and tenon, the way a shoulder fits and the peg locks it so that time and weather cannot pry it apart. Augers bite in circles, a brace turns like a slow dance. A pole lathe turns bowl blanks and whirls, foot pumping, hand steady, chisel singing a gentle spiral into wood that glows. Coopers raise barrels from staves with a patience that feels like prayer, coaxing hoops down until the wood drinks and swells to seal against leak and loss. Sled runners are steamed and bent around a former, bound in rawhide and kissed with pine tar so they fly over snow. A ship's plank, sprung loose by a hidden rock months ago, receives a new trunnel, wooden nail, driven home by measured blows. Nothing goes to waste. Even offcuts become wedges, toggles, loom pegs, and the fleet of small repairs that keeps a house more nimble than rich. Iron lies a little apart because it glows. In the separate smithy or the lee of a windbreak, the bellows muscles heat into the hearth until the bloom or bar is the colour of a late sunset. The anvil has corners for each mood, a flat for honest work, a horn for bending, an edge for cutting. Tongs speak the language of trust. The smith's forearms speak the language of heat. Nails, rivets, sayax blades, strap hinges, buckles, fishing hooks, and repair rings appear under the hammer. When the hammering stops, a rasp finishes, a file whispers, and a bucket of water hisses a verdict. Iron smells different when it is right. A file that skates means the steel has hardened enough. A blade that drinks the whetstone well means it will serve. Pine tar and birch pitch wait in little pots to seal, mend and glue. Twined sinew and leather thongs take over where iron mustn't go. Leather and hide are winter's industry. Fresh hides are fleshed with a curved knife, then soaked and scraped, then stretched on frames to dry in wind that knows its job. Tanning takes bark, time, and hands that can keep vigil without boredom. Oak makes tough, sweet leather. Willow gives a paler strength. Fish oil answers where bark is scarce. Then come the tools, awls that pierce, bone needles that stitch with waxed thread, lashed seams that turn water if the seamster knows how to angle stitch and tension. Shoes are cut to the memory of the foot they'll carry. Belts are decorated with punch and bevel for the pleasure of it. Scabbards cradle knives and swords so iron won't kiss damp. Harness is maintained with frequency that would shame a rich man's horse. A break in harvest is a break in bread. The farm work follows the sky. In spring, the ard, a light plough, cuts lines. The soil has been missing all winter. Oxen lean, gentle engines listening to a voice, and a goad that never needs to be cruel. Furrows open, seed goes down from a careful hand, the harrow drags behind to tuck the earth back warm. Fencing is mended where snow and deer conspired, ditches are cleared, field edges are walked with an eye for the small signs that predict a summer. Hand tools are constant, spades with ash shafts, hoes that keep weeds from speech, sickles with teeth that bite barley clean. When hay stands right, dry stem with a memory of green, scythes swing in arcs that keep time with each other, swaths fall straight, rakes gather, stacks rise. A good stack sheds rain and breathes from within. A bad one teaches humility and the art of again. Manure is gold with the smell of truth. Spread right, it fattens fields that pay the household back in bread. At the water's edge, the tools change, but the work's honesty doesn't. Nets are made and mended with netting needles that shuttle knot to knot, meshes counted like prayers, floats carved from light wood, sinkers from stone or scrap lead. Long lines are baited in coils that must not tangle, if patience is to be rewarded when the line goes overboard in the half-light. Hooks are sharpened, barbs shaped. A clever mind plays with bone lures polished until fish and sun agree. In good years, fish are hung in thin northern wind to become stockfish, or smoked until their colour tells you they'll last a journey. Salt, when there's enough to spare, preserves and makes trade possible. Where salt is dear, the cold and the smoke take the burden. Boats receive their share of attention. Seams are paid with a mix of tar and fibre, thwarts inspected, oar pins repaired. A fisherman's kit is simple and complete. Knife, spare line, small awl, and wax for an emergency repair, a stone for edge, and a luck marker no one admits to believing in. Grain becomes food by turning stone. The quern's upper stone circles on the lower. The sound is a steady hush, not unlike rain, a measure that calms children and gives thought a rhythm. Flour sifts into a wooden trough. Bran is saved for porridge. The day's bread starts as a lump in a bowl that has known dough so long it helps the starter remember itself. Flatbreads press against a hot stone at the fire's edge. A heavier loaf bakes under an upturned pot, embers heaped over it until the knock sounds hollow. Brewing takes up another corner of the calendar. A mash tun that doubles as a tub, malted barley dried on a frame, water heated, sweet liquid drawn off and boiled with what the region offers, juniper, heather, or hops where they're known. Yeast is a loan from the last batch, treasured as quietly as any tool, and the ale that results is safer than raw water and kinder than cold. In lean months, sour whey is a steady drink and a gift to the gut. Dairy is a kingdom with its own clock. Milk is strained and warmed, curds coaxed out with rennet saved from a calf's stomach or plant substitutes when needs must. Curds are cut, lifted into cloth, pressed under stone weights that have been family for generations. Butter is churned in a rhythm anyone can hum. The first break in the cream brings a grin every time, even when elbows ache. Buttermilk goes into bread, whey into soups and drinks. Nothing wasted. Cheeses dry on shelves breathed upon by the same smoked air that keeps beams sound. Some are eaten young, some kept and turned, rubbed with salt or set in a cool nook of earth that the house knows like a second pantry. Trade is measured, not guessed. A balance scale lives in a chest with its set of small weights, pebbles of lead or bronze marked so a hand can reach without rereading the world. Silver's not always coins. More often it is hack silver, cut lengths weighed honestly while eyes and reputations do their own arithmetic. An L-stick leans by the loom. Cloth is measured by its own law. Tally sticks bite with a knife at each notch. Debts and payments that speak even when memory chooses poetry instead. The best bargain is the one both sides keep telling as a fair tale. Season and weather edit the task list every morning. In summer hides a brain tanned before rot has a chance to speak. Bark is cut while sap is a friend. Flax, where it's grown, is retted in a pond that many noses do not love, then broken, scutched, hackled, until the fibres run like water through the fingers and linen dreams can begin. In autumn, slaughter falls where need and mercy meet. Meat is cut fine for drying, salted in tubs with lids that clamp down like judgment, smoked in undertones. In winter, shoes are resoled, sleds are shod with iron where ice dictates, skis are planed thin and bellied to rise, children shape bird snares, adults set box traps and deadfalls along known runs. The bow keeps its string dry and its arrows fletched with feathers that know the path of air. Music and measure travel through work like threads you can only see when you turn the cloth to the light. Hay is lifted to a cadence, oars pulled to a beat, loom strokes counted in pattern numbers that become songs. A scold might be paid in food and a berth, but the house holds its own music, a jaw harp in a pocket, a bone flute made from a goose's gift, a drum when winter requires a louder heart. Games teach hands and minds even here. Nefatiful pieces carved from antler slide on boards scratched into a bench. Dice roll from knucklebone between tasks, practicing probability while laughter keeps the room elastic. Bone and antler are quiet treasures in a place where iron cannot do everything and wood should not. A saw cross-cuts a tine, a knife scrapes and refines. A bow drill bores neat holes with a spatter of fine dust that smells faintly sweet. Combs are carved, teeth set straight and even. Needle cases are polished until fingers love them. Pins for cloaks and hair take on beast heads and knotwork, because a little beauty costs no extra time when the hands already know the way. A gaming piece gets a weight of lead hidden in its belly so it sits with authority. A fish gaff receives a barb that respects the life it will end by doing its job quickly. Maintenance is the grown-up form of hope. Edges are checked every evening. Knife, seax, scythe, auger bit. A stone that fits the palm walks along the edge. A strop finishes what grit begins. A crack in a bucket hoop is bound before it yawns wide. A loosened peg is replaced before someone leans on it at the wrong moment. Tar is warmed to flow into a seam that's thinking of becoming a leak. A roof is read from inside by how the smoke travels, and from outside by how the thatch combs into the wind. A handful of sod, a bundle of reed, a twist of withes, small acts that keep storms from becoming stories. Tools are wiped and hung, not out of fussy love, but because tomorrow is always closer than it looks. Children's hands are folded into this work early, but not foolishly. A little one learns the safe end of a knife and which way to pass it. They learn the sleeping places of tools so that finding is as easy as reaching, and so that the sharp edge is always turned away from the world. They are taught the names of woods by their smell when shaved. They are sent to the shore to gather bladderwrack for the garden, to the meadow to bring home a fistful of flowers that will become dye, to the hillside to listen to the wind and report what it says about tomorrow. They know the taste of snow from different storms because someone thought to ask them to notice. Their games are practice and their practice is play. Above all, the day's labour is a rope woven from many strands, muscle and memory, tool and touch, season and sky. One person cannot hold it alone. A loom without a spinner is a quiet animal. A field without a scythe is a promise. A knife without a whetstone is a future disappointment. A fire without someone to mind it is a trickster. So hands find each other. When the hay cart comes in heavy, shoulders arrive uncalled. When the dye pot is at risk of boiling over, another pair of eyes watches while the first pair ties off a thread. When an axle squeals, someone is already walking to the pitch pot. Work flows to where it is needed and drains away when it's done, leaving only the satisfaction of a tool set back right and a house that hums, the kind of hum that carries people to sleep knowing that tomorrow's list will be long again and that they are ready for it. Morning begins with a wooden bowl warm in the hands and steam feathering the air. Barley or oats cooked into a thick porridge, flecked with a knob of butter if the dairy has been kind, sweetened with a spoon of honey when the hive year allows it, or tarted with a splash of sour whey when stores must stretch. A child will take theirs runnier, a shepherd thicker, so it sits in the belly and holds through wind. Bread follows the clock of the fire, thin rounds slapped onto a hot stone at the hearth's edge when the flames are lively, thicker loaves baked under an upturned pot heaped with embers when heat runs steady and patient. The loaves smell of last summer's field and this morning's smoke, a flavour you come to miss if you leave home too long. Cooking is choreography. A big iron or soapstone cauldron hangs from a trammel chain that clicks as it is raised and lowered to fine-tune a simmer. The day lives inside that pot, barley softening, leeks, cabbage and turnips sweetening as their edges blur. A joint of mutton or goat going in when the year allows. Fish added near the end so it flakes rather than dissolves. A flat stone warms on the side for griddle bread. A small pot keeps milk shy of boiling for skyer. A lidded clay vessel nests in the coals to bake root cakes, or a custard strengthened with an egg from the hen that still lays in winter's dim. A ladle moves like a clock hand. Stir, taste, adjust with a pinch of salt that was bought dear at market or boiled down from sea brine in summer when fuel was plentiful. The pantry is not a room but a web of clever places. Along the rafters, hooks carry garlands of fish turned leathery in the long dry air. Tufts of herbs, angelica, dill, juniper, hang in crisp bunches. Strings of onions and beads of dried apples sway slightly when the door opens. In a cool corner shaded from the hearth live tubs and barrels, one with sour whey, another with salted meat, a third with a lid so tight you can drum on it and wake a smile, the butter tub. At the far end a lidded chest holds dry goods, barley, oats, rye, peas, beans. The best moisture-proofing is knowledge. Lids lined with beeswax, seams sealed with pitch, sacks lifted off the floor on slats so damp as a harder path. In summer, a pit dug just outside and lined with bark becomes a cold store. In winter, the whole world is a larder if you keep fox and dog honest. Preservation is the family's second fire. Meat and fish become shelf-stable in many dialects. Salted in layers inside a barrel and weighed with a clean stone. Smoked in the house's high breath until the flesh turns a varnished brown and resists the teeth for a long satisfying chew. Wind-dried on racks where the air is keen and the sun cautious. Buried in cool sand for a time, or laid in a weak brine that takes on the flavours of bay and juniper where trade has been kind. In lean years a sharper art emerges, fermenting fish or lamb in carefully managed coolness, to create a strong food that the stomach learns to respect before it learns to love. Sausages use everything the slaughter gave, Blood is stirred into oats with spices and salt and cooked until it sets into food that refuses to be ashamed of thrift. Bones boil until they surrender a broth that turns thin stew into a feast. The leftover fat becomes candles for feast days or lamp fuel when fish oil runs low. Dairy work is a soft thunder in the background. Milk is strained into a wide tub the moment it enters the door. Cleanliness here is not a sermon but survival. Rennet curdles some. Heat cuddles the curds into cohesion, and a cheesecloth, woven in the very room that will eat from it, lifts the trembling mass to drain. Pressing stones, smooth from years of purpose, stack on a board atop the curd. Salt is rubbed in with a firm hand, then the wheel dries on a shelf where the air is slow and clean. Fresh cheeses are eaten fast, harder ones are turned on schedule, their rinds rubbed, their progress smelled and tapped. Butter is rhythm. Paddles beat. The cream clumps. Buttermilk pours off and gets saved for bread and drinks. The butter washes until the water runs clear and is patted into a cool tub, leaves pressed on top to keep air away. On good days there is clotted cream for a child's birthday, and a dollop of sweetened curds for anyone with a name day. On ordinary days, dairy simply underwrites the house's strength. Vegetables are not garnish, they are insurance. Cabbage stores like a champion and gives body to winter food. Leeks are a cook's favourite for good reason. They forgive overlong simmering and taste like kindness. Turnips and swedes wait in sand-lined bins like sleeping moons. Carrots lay under damp cloths. Parsnips grow sweeter after a frost and therefore earn their keep when days are short. Peas and broad beans dry in their pods and rattle like tiny drums. They become stews on days when all the meat is either a memory or a promise. In spring, nettles and young sorrel appear, boiled with barley to become a bright, almost lemony soup that seems to wake the blood after winter. Wild foods keep a secret thread of variety running through the year. Bilberries and lingonberries dried or buried in whey. Hazelnuts cracked on the doorstep, mushrooms sliced and strung, seaweed collected, rinsed and boiled to make a dish that tastes of the shore. Angelica stems are candied in honey when the hives are generous. In places where it grows, it is medicine and vegetable in one. Spices are stories in a sachet. Pepper exists but is rare enough to announce a guest or a boast. Garlic is more common, and mends as many dishes as it mends colds. Mustard seeds crack between teeth and wake up a cold piece of mutton. Bog myrtle steps in where hops are thin, lending ale a bitter backbone. Imported luxuries, cinnamon, ginger, arrive in crumbs and whispers with a trader who knows how to use silence to raise his prices. They might go into a festival pot, but most days the house leans on what grows under the same weather as the family. Drinks mark the hour as much as any sunbeam. Ale is more than a pleasure. It is safety, since the boil that birthed it smothered many mischiefs that water carries. It comes in strengths. Small ale for children and working thirsts. A darker, stronger brew for feast. Mead is a holiday in a horn or a wooden cup, and it tastes as much of the bee's summer as it does of the brewer's patience. Sour whey is sharp but refreshing, and in the hayfield it tastes better than anything has a right to. Herbal infusions, yarrow, mint, birch leaves, steep in a pot set in the hearth's lee and comfort sickness, or sleeplessness when called. Eating together is an arrangement of respect. Trestles go up fast and come down faster when space is needed again. A long board becomes a table. Wooden trenchers receive ladles of stew. Knives do double duty. Spoons are shared from a pot if the company is intimate and well known. Salt sits central as wealth and seasoning. Before hands reach out, a basin and a cloth travel the benches for washing. No one calls it ceremony, but it is. The high seat watches manners without speaking. Children learn where to sit by who they are near, and reach only as far as their rank allows. Afterward, bowls are rinsed with hot water, scoured with a twist of straw, and set to dry on their sides so air can finish what water began. Scraps do not go far. Dog, pig and chicken see to that. While bones, cracked for marrow, end their journey in the pot that will be tomorrow's strength. And always the dance with pests. Mice are opportunists. Cats are the counter-argument and are paid in warmth and soft sleeping spots more than in milk. Bags are hung, lids are weighted, traps are baited with just enough to be persuasive. A handful of ash on the floor deters ants. Smoke is friend and fumigator. Fresh rushes strewn and swept keep the sweet rot smell away. A chest that smells of pitch is a chest that will still hold grain after a hungry month. When the lamps are trimmed low and bowls stacked, the room turns itself into a bedroom with the same speed and certainty that it turned into a kitchen by dawn. Benches along the long walls become beds, their wooden boards concealed under sacks stuffed with straw, heather, or down when luck has introduced a goose to the family. In winter, the straw is dry and crackles when you shift. In summer, new heather smells green and slightly wild. On top go layered wool blankets woven in the same room, plain weave for strength, diamond twill for pride, then furs thrown over when frost presses hard against the outer turf. Privacy is made, not built. A length of thick cloth unrolls from a beam and becomes a curtain. A patterned hanging, geometric forms, animals with interlaced bodies, breaks draughts and eyes alike. An alcove is born with 3 motions: hang, tuck, pin. The small spaces created are not only for sleeping. They form reading nooks, prayer corners, places to cry or laugh without turning the whole room into witness. The best spots, the ones free of draughts, friendly to warmth, are assigned by age, need, and quiet politics. A nursing mother closer to the fire's flank, an elder who wakes stiff placed where stepping to the night lamp and back is easy, children behind a screen where their sighing won't pull everyone's attention at every turn. Pillows exist but are not the default. Heads rest on bolsters stuffed with wool or feathers where available, or simply on an arm tucked beneath. A heated stone wrapped in cloth comes to bed on the hardest nights, having sat near the hearth until it glows with a slow, safe warmth. It is pushed by feet from chill to comfort and back again as the heat ebbs. Socks of nail-bound wool are more precious than almost anything else when the air bites. The stitch yields a dense fabric that laughs at cold. Hands meet sleep inside mittens when the wind sings through the thatch like a thin flute. Furnishings are few and thus well loved. Chests do more than store clothing. They are seats by day and bedside tables by night. Their lids show a life of dents and knife lines, the marks of bread sliced and yarn measured, the scratched game boards of Nefertafel and 9 men's Morris that wait for a quiet hour. A 3-legged stool finds level ground where a 4-legged chair would rock. A high-backed settle near the hearth traps heat along the spine and lets a watchful adult doze in a half-sit while listening for a child's cough or a strange footstep outside. The high seat sleeps too when necessary. Honour has a blanket and dignity yields to fatigue. Walls wear warm. Woven hangings insulate as much as they ornament. A row of shields doubles as pride and baffle against draughts. Their bosses catch lamplight like small moons. A shelf keeps night things at hand. A small lamp with its wick trimmed so it will wake easily. A cup of water. A comb whose teeth have their own tale of patience. A little pouch with a sprig of dried herb, lavender where it grows, juniper where it doesn't, to sweeten the nose and people say the dreams. A chamber pot, plain and necessary, lurks discreetly behind a hanging. In the morning it meets ash and a trip outside. The house settles into a night music. You can tell where the warmest currents flow by where the dog makes his circle and drops with a satisfied breath. Along the floor near the bench that faces the hearth's lee, cats patrol the roof of the benches with silent steps and then curl into the crook of a knee when their work is done. From the byre end comes animal sleep, the slow bellows of cattle, the shuffle of hooves finding a new comfort, the occasional dream bleat from a lamb. Beams creak and then fall still. Somewhere a tiny cascade of ash inside the hearth tells you a coal just collapsed into a deeper rest. Outside, the wind runs its hand over the roof and finds every reed in place. Inside, the smoke layer floats high, a ceiling cloud thin as a memory. Comfort is crafted as carefully as any knife. Drafts are read and tamed. A leather flap over a slit window is tilted just enough. A rolled rug snakes along the foot of a door to block the creeping cold. A screen is shifted the width of a finger to redirect a whisper of air from a sleeping child to the more robust back of a shepherd. Bedding is minded like stores. Straw sacks are shaken and refilled before they compress into boards. Blankets are aired on rare dry winter days and beaten with willow rods until they smell of clean cold rather than of weeks indoors. Lice and fleas exist, but so do combs, hot water, and the stubbornness that comes from knowing a house can be better tomorrow than it was yesterday. Saturday bath day means fresh linen at night, and there are few luxuries more honest than sliding under blankets with clean skin when snow has tried, all week to argue otherwise. Sickness changes the geometry. A bench becomes a sick bed and moves closer to the fire, or the fire moves closer to the bed by the simple act of banking it long and narrow to reach. A screen comes in not for privacy but for warmth, and to keep draughts from stealing the breath. A pot of water stays simmering for poultices. A little chest yields honey, dried berries, and herbs the house trusts. Yarrow for fever, thyme for cough, angelica to strengthen. Someone sleeps within reach of the patient's cup. The night's watch is voluntary, inevitable. The house knows how to take turns without announcing them. When a baby is expected, a cradle is hung from a beam where the sway of the house itself soothes better than any human arm can sustain through a second hour. Fresh rushes go beneath, and a blanket waits that was folded months before in hope, as practical as it is tender. Summer has its own sleep. Doors and vents are propped. A person stretches with one leg outside the covers. Blankets thin to a single woven layer. Linen shirts turn into nightwear. Fresh-cut heather becomes a bed that releases a green breath with every turn. Some nights, bodies drift out into the yard after the last of the midges go down and sleep under the suggestion of stars wrapped in cloaks. Waking to dew on the face is an intimacy with the land that even winter's hearth cannot match. In the grain rush, naps become currency. A bench near the door, the soft side of a hayrick, the shaded lee of the byre. Each is a valid bed for a short time and confers its own kind of relief. Objects keep peace by preventing quarrel with the body. A footstool under a dangling heel stops a leg from numbing. A rolled cloak under the waist turns a hard bench into a forgiving bed. A simple wedge under a bedboard takes the squeak out of a night so no one wakes to a ghost that is only joinery complaining. In the coldest months, sleeping closer, not farther, is the answer. Bodies are insulation as old as mammals. The etiquette around this is obvious and kind, and jokes about it are old and gentler than the wind that made the arrangement sensible. Morning does not so much arrive as rise from the coals. Someone lifts the lamp from its hook, lifts the ash lid off the hearth's heart, and the red there is as beautiful as any sunrise for those who have to make one happen with breath and sticks. Blankets fold back, straw sacks get a quick shake and a tuck, curtains roll and tie, the high-backed settle resumes its post as seat and not cot, chests close with the small click of a latch that says valuables are put by, day is in session. The house becomes a workshop again, and the sleeping room becomes a memory under the surface of everything, ready to be summoned at sundown in the same space with equal right. Comfort here is not a room you enter. It is a practice that travels with you from bench to bench, from season to season, from the first ember to the last. Cleanliness begins with hands in warm water and ends with smoke in the rafters doing its quiet work. A bucket is drawn fresh at dawn. The first ladle rinses the night from faces, the second goes to the teeth with a twig chewed soft at one end until it blooms like a small brush. Bone or bronze toothpicks sit in a little cup near the wash basin, slender, well used, often carved with a flourish, because even plain tools enjoy a little pride. Combs of antler or bone live in every chest and pocket. Their close, straight teeth pull out dust and lice and leave hair sleek with a little animal fat or butter rubbed in to tame wayward strands. Tweezers and ear spoons share a small leather pouch with a mirror of polished metal or highly burnished stone, a quick flash of self in a dim world. Soap is made rather than bought. Wood ash steeped in water gives lye. Lye stirred into rendered fat becomes a soft, biting soap that cleans woolen shirts and human skin with equal zeal if you keep it away from the eyes. Linen is washed more often than heavy wool. Shirts and shifts are boiled in an iron pot with soapwort or a dash of lye, then beaten with paddles in the yard and rinsed in running water until the suds give up. In deep winter, snow does the work. Garments laid on clean drifts and beaten with a willow rod brighten as if the cold itself were a bleaching sun. After the washing comes the drying. Lines strung high above the hearth, where smoke and warmth keep mildew at bay, or on a still day, a fence gleaming with white and pale grey as shirts drink the wind. Saturday is bathing day in name and habit, a rhythm folded into the week so tightly that even busy seasons respect it. Where the land is generous, a hot spring becomes a community room. Where it is not, a bathhouse waits, a low hut or room with a stone hearth outside to heat fist-sized rocks until they glow. Those stones slide into a pit or a tub of water, lids lift, steam rises and turns people pink and pliant. Birch switches, supple and aromatic, thrum lightly against backs and legs to stir the blood and loosen the chill that lives in joints all winter. In coastal places, a plunge into cold sea after sweat feels like waking twice in one day. Soap is used sparingly, too precious to squander, but linen is fresh, hair is combed, and nails are cleaned with small knives as the stories of the week unwind in friendly steam. Everyday grooming denies the lazy caricature. Beards are trimmed to fashion or work, moustaches are shaped to keep out of spoons, long hair is braided, pinned, or wrapped in a simple knot that keeps it clear of flame and fleece. Little bags of pleasant smells hang from belts or bedposts. Dried sweet gale, crushed juniper, a curl of birch bark, reassurance that the human nose still rules beneath the smoky order of the house. Fleas and lice do not vanish, but neither are they kings. Blankets are aired when sun appears, seams are stitched tight to give pests fewer hiding places, and combs like saws sing through hair with the persistence of people who do not accept discomfort as destiny. Waste has its rules, as firm as any law. The latrine sits downwind and downhill, screened by brush or turf walls, its pit sprinkled with ash to sweeten and speed the earth's forgetfulness. At night a chamber pot lives under a bench. In the morning it walks discreetly to the pit. Kitchen scraps that do not suit the dog go to the midden, layered with straw, swept ash and peelings, where the farm's future fertility ripens. Manure from the byre mixed with peat and plant waste becomes spring's wealth. Water used for washing is flung on paths that appreciate mud control. Greasy water sees a pot of herbs first, so the smell walks out of the house in a better mood. Health is a chain of small, steady choices. Fresh water is drawn from the cleanest source available. If doubt creeps in, the pot solves it. Boiled water cools in a lidded jar for the big thirsts. Burns are common friends of haste. They meet cool water quickly, then a soothing cloth dipped in whey, or a smear of honey kept for wounds because experience says honey calms and keeps rot from taking hold. Cuts are rinsed until they stop arguing, stitched with horsehair or linen thread if deep, bound with clean wool, and watched by eyes that know the first colour of trouble. Sprains learn wood and wool, splints shaped to the limb, bound firm but not mean, and carried carefully while a good story makes time behave better. Herbs stand by like neighbours. Yarrow staunches, plantain soothes, angelica strengthens the shaken, juniper clears rooms and lungs alike when burned, thyme and chamomile whisper to chests weary of coughing. Dried tansy discourages unwanted guests in mattresses. Mint is a summer kindness in cups and on cloths laid across hot brows. A box on the high shelf holds all of this in tidy packets, each labelled in a hand steady enough to trust in the dark. The healer in a district might be a woman with a midwife's bag and winter hands, or an older man who sets bones and knows which fever to fight and which to starve. Often it is both, passing skills the way people pass bread, without ceremony, but with respect. Birth draws the house close around one bed. Clean linen waits months ahead. The cradle is slung from a beam where sway is gentle and safe. A small knife, its blade blessed by habit if not by priest, lies ready to cut the cord. Woolen threads are boiled and dried for tying. Warmth is everything. The hearth pulled long, a windboard set just so to keep drafts from a new chest. Women gather, hands that have done this before, and the room becomes a circle of breath and instruction. After, broth steams, honeyed milk soothes, and a watch is kept, not of suspicion, but of care. Weeks later, when Mother returns to full duty, the keys resume their music at her belt and the room relaxes into its ordinary obedience. Sickness in the wide sense teaches distance when needed. A cough that moves through the valley turns benches into islands. Cups stop travelling hand to hand. A sick person's bowl and spoon become their own nation, rinsed and dried apart. The screened corner near the hearth becomes hospital and chapel both. A lamp trimmed lower to please aching eyes, a pot kept simmering for broths, and a runner sent to the next farm with a question. What worked for you? When death comes, despite all, the house knows how to hush. Windows and vents open for a moment to let air make its old exchange. Embers are banked calmly. Water is heated for washing the body. Words are spoken in the voice that is used for true things only. Even in perfect health, the body craves heat, clean cloth, and air that moves correctly. Those are the house's three steady gifts. The smoke layer high overhead is not only nuisance, it dries beams, preserves meat, discourages insects, and makes winter lungs feel a little more armoured against damp. Clean linen against skin is a small luxury multiplied by routine, changed on bath day, hung where it will drink smoke and air, put on cool and smooth so sleep feels like respect. Air's pathways are managed like livestock, a flap closed against a contrary wind, a door braced open a hand's width on the right afternoons, a vent lifted when stew and steam would otherwise make the room heavy. In these small labours leaves a long life. When the year turns, the house turns its face with it, and the work, the sounds, and even the taste of sleep change like tides. Summer spills light, as if day will never end. Doors lean open, and the room extends outward into the yard and fields. The Longhouse becomes an organ with many pipes. The loom stands quiet because hands are in hay and at sea. The quern sings at dawn and dusk instead, when coolness will keep ground flower sweet. You hear scythes whispering in the meadows, a beat of whetstone and steel every few minutes like the metronome of July. Ropes creak as nets dry. Gulls argue above a rack of fish. Children shout at a river where cloth beats and rinses. A dog barks at a raven who already knows the ending of this conversation. The wind in summer is a companion. Salt off the sea, resin from the forest, heat rolling from fields, all of it threading through the thatch with a dry rustle. Inside, the house speaks in lighter tones. Doors thump and rebound, footsteps are quicker on bare floorboards and tamped earth. The hearth burns smaller, more steward than master. Meals take a bright edge. Fresh herbs, milk so new it still remembers the udder, bread that never fully cools before it is eaten by hands headed out the door again. Sleep thins. People lie across blankets rather than under them, wakes in the small hours to step outside and feel the palpable presence of the stars that refuse to fully arrive this far north in high summer. Autumn is the accountant. The barn fills, the pantry becomes a geography of barrels whose contents are checked by rap of knuckles. A dull thud for salt meat, a hollow ring for emptiness you must answer soon. Cabbages are pulled and hung by their roots in cool places. Apples find their way onto strings, a rosary of winter hope. Onions and garlic braid themselves into decoration that is also insurance. Pigs grow round and then become wealth stacked in layers of fat and flesh, salted and smoked while the weather agrees to be your partner. The house sounds heavier in these months. The thunk of filled jars on shelves, the rasp of knife on bone, the satisfied clap of a chest lid shutting on dry grain. Outside, wind begins to test the roof with a different hand, probing rather than patting, and someone climbs to clean the eaves before the first serious rain can puddle and pry. Winter is an invitation to turn inward without becoming small. Darkness arrives early and leaves late, the fire grows long again, and the benches bloom with work that waits for such months. Spinning that turns hours into usefulness, weaving that grows a blanket like a low, steady song, carving that requires patience. The field never leaves you in summer. The loom beats a heart into the room. Thrum, 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 pause, thrum, a rhythm that makes talk more thoughtful and quiet more companionable. The quern's hush keeps time with the tale. The knife's whisper through green wood releases the scent of sap that feels almost like a promise of spring. Outside, snow shrinks the world to a few careful paths. Inside, tiles of lamplight make islands where eyes rest. Winter's weather plays the roof like an instrument. Dry, powdery snow falls with a muffled insistence that barely scratches the ear. Wet snow arrives with soft thuds and the occasional whoosh as a sheet slides free and lands off the eave. In a gale, you can hear the thatch combing the wind into strands. The ropes and wooden pegs that stitch roof to frame answer with tiny, even complaints, like an old ship riding a big sea. The turf walls of houses in treeless lands hold warmth like a hand around a cup. Their edges frost in delicate lace, where inside heat meets outside iron. When rain comes fierce, it clatters, then hisses, and the smell through the smoke hole is clean and green enough to make even a tired person lift their head and breathe deep. Inside winter's soundscape, animals add their own metronomes. Cattle shift and sigh. A cow ruminates with a sound like the sea heard through a wall. Sheep, if they share the roof, stamp once, twice, then go quiet again. The dog dreams and runs without moving, paws ticking in place. The cat patrols beams like a ghost who never falls. From time to time, icicles crack from the eaves and fall with a brittle chime that makes everyone glance up and smile at winter's small theatrics. Somewhere near the door, wet boots hiss faintly as they remember dry. Between these poles of bright and dark, the shoulder seasons teach subtlety. Spring moves underfoot first, frost giving up an hour earlier each week, then noses into the door with a smell of wet earth and old leaves. You hear drip before you see green, water ticking from the eaves, from branches, from everything that carried winter on its back. The river hurries and talks, the birds sharpen their notes, and lambs add the cheerful chaos of life that bounces rather than walks. The house opens its vents wider. Smoke thins. The floor returns to the practice of being swept 5 times a day because mud has re-entered the story. Storms are a separate chapter in every season's book. You read them before they speak if you have lived inside these walls long enough. A change in the angle of wind sneaking under the door, the way the fire smoke loses its ambition and crouches, the feel on skin that is not quite cold and not quite warm. Then comes the press, rain or snow, or a long hand of air pushing on the gable as if asking to be let in. The house replies by flexing. Someone checks the roof pegs by the ladder, tucks another withy where a tuft of thatch lifted, banks the fire lower to keep sparks tamer, and moves a bucket to the drip that always arrives in a particular weather as punctual as a guest. These are not crises. They are the rituals of living with a sky that speaks plainly. People keep their own weather calendars, the rustle particular to ripe barley, the insect hush that announces rain, the ring of frost underfoot that means the pond may carry weight by dusk. These are all notes in the family's score. On the coast, the sea is a barometer with voices. A far-off growl against a reef in calm weather tells you nothing. That same growl on a day when wind is supposed to be gentle advises you to tie one more knot at the mooring and set an extra peg in the roof. Inland, the forest teaches its own languages. Birch leaves that show their pale undersides mean wind from a new quarter. Ravens on the move mean somebody else's field has been turned. Frogs starting or stopping their chorus twice in a night means indecision. Yours or the weather's. The house answers every season with small rearrangements. In summer, trestle tables live more often outside. Dye pots migrate to the yard. The sleeping bench closest to the door becomes a daybed for those who nap between hayfield and fishing. In autumn, barrels take precedence. The loom is edged over, and an aisle becomes a tasting lane where lids lift and noses judge salt and smoke with concentration that would dignify a court. In winter, screens multiply. Draught paths are bent like rivers around sleeping children. The high seat gains a footstool that knows the bottom of a thick sock. In spring, the inside becomes scaffold and workshop. Seed bags are counted on the table where feast platters sat at Yule. Harness is mended with needles fat as geese. The house smells faintly of pitch, leather and optimism. All the while, sound is the diary you do not have to write. Morning is the quick mathematics of bowls, spoons and ladles. Midday is quieter, a rush outside. Evening is the long cord, loom, quern, lamp wicks being trimmed, a story's cadence shaping itself round the day's edges. If the wind strips the world of detail, the house supplies it. A laugh from the buyer, the sputter of a lamp that wants its wick nudged, the click of a key at a belt, dice ticking in a cup and spilling like little bones on a board scratched into a chest lid. You can close your eyes and know the month, sometimes the week, by listening. The Longhouse is an instrument, tuned to the climate, played by the people, responsive to the smallest changes in pressure and mood. It does not silence the world outside. It makes a harmony with it, a low, steady drone of labour, luck, and weather, through which the songs of feast, storm, and sleep can rise and fall without breaking the thread. Begin with the door opening and the cold stepping back. A traveller stands there, wet cloak, tired eyes, tongue hesitant with the house's name. No one asks for his story yet. First a seat near the warm side of the hearth. First a wooden cup filled. First a bowl pressed into his hand so the heat runs into his fingers and up his arms. Hospitality is not a performance. It is a rule with teeth. Feed before you question. Offer a place at the bench that befits a stranger, neither too grand nor too mean. So you don't lie about your own worth or insult the roads. Only when the bowl is light and the shoulders have dropped does talk begin. Where from, where bound, whose kin, what news. If he brings tidings of storm or feud, the room tightens a notch. More logs on the fire, a lamplight turned toward faces so words will be clear and remembered. The hearth is court, chapel, and market all at once. By its light, oaths have the weight of iron. A ring lives in the house, thick-banded and kept clean. When law is at hand, it is warmed by the fire and held so that skin feels the heat while words are spoken. Swearing on wood alone is easy. Swearing on metal that bites a little while you speak makes a person choose honesty with more care. Some oaths rest a palm on the high seat pillar, the carved post that is not just wood but lineage. Tell the truth here, the room says, and the smoke will carry it up where it can't be retracted. Belief threads through these acts without needing to announce itself. A pinch of food to the coals before the first mouthful, done without commentary. A whisper at the small shelf that keeps family tokens. A Thor's hammer hammered thin and worn smooth between finger and thumb. A little cross carved from driftwood. A tiny bead that belonged to a grandmother who knew how to read the wind from the colour of the sea. The house speaks several dialects of reverence comfortably. Old ways linger close. A cup of ale poured out at the threshold for the land wights who mine the homestead's luck. A quiet, private offering for the elves and ancestors at season's turn. A promise made to a god of thunder or sea not as flattery, but as a contract with a power that can break boats and bind ice. New ways take their place without pushing. A blessing before bread, a hymn's tune learned from a priest who walks a long circuit, a fast day observed with more vegetables and less boasting. No proclamation is needed. The roof holds both, because the point is not victory, but survival, honour, and a good death after a long life. Feasting is half sacrament, half politics. On a night of abundance, slaughter done, barrels tight, nets lucky. The boards go up and the lamps multiply. A boar's head or a great fish sits where everyone can see the year's success made edible. Horns pass in order, strongest to the host's right, a reminder that rank is a tool for keeping peace if it is used correctly. Toasts rise and fall, to gods and saints, to the dead of the house, to alliances that are not merely conversations but ropes tied across winters. A poem is paid for with meat and silver. A song stitches the benches into a single breath. A child watches how a bowl is offered with two hands for respect, how a guest's empties are read by the host's eye from across the room, how a quarrel is wrapped in a joke and placed under the table to be dealt with later, sober and in daylight. Law lives in the Longhouse every day and travels out of it to the assembly when the moment requires witnesses. The rhythm is old. First talk here in low voices to see if the fire can melt the iron edge from a conflict. If not, send word to the neighbouring farms. Choose a day at the thing place when the paths will be passable and tempers able to walk. A dispute over land. Boundaries know stones and waters. A stream that changed its course. A cairn that toppled in frost. A line of birch that grew and therefore moved its shadow. People bring memory like a ledger. My father and his father moved that stone when the ash tree fell. Ask old Kietil. He held the other end. If the disagreement is deeper, blood spilled, honour torn, then the law's scaffolding rises into view. Compensation is measured not only by loss, but by the need for the valley to remain a place where people can pass each other on narrow paths without reaching for steel. Vergild, man price, is counted, not to put a coin value on a life, but to create a stare back down from a height where nobody wants to live. Feud. Sureties are named, men and women whose reputations are a currency the quarrellers borrow until they can pay with peace. Hands are joined over the ring or the gospel, a date is set, cattle or silver or cloth changes ownership, and a story that might have become a saga becomes instead a contained memory, a warning and a relief. The assembly itself is part market, part court, part theatre of the possible. A law speaker's voice, trained to carry without hurry, recites the bones of the code so no one can claim ignorance. He knows whole chapters by heart. The words are less his than the community's, and the crowd murmurs at each turn like surf on shingle. Disputes are heard. Witnesses step forward to say what they saw, and equally important, what they did not. In such a place, a house's character is currency. If your word is good in winter, when supplies are low and lies might be convenient, your word will be believed in summer when the stakes are higher. Mercy is used deliberately. Exile is pronounced sparingly and remembered forever. A lesser outlaw goes with a time limit and the hope of return. A greater outlaw has his name shaved off the valley like old bark. No friend to harbour him, no legal way back. People look down at their hands when that happens, studying lines as if to remind themselves what kind of craft they intend to practice. Back home, justice takes quieter forms. A neighbour who trampled a field with a cart in thaw time brings a plank and nails to repair the fence he broke, and drops off a ham besides, so the apology has weight. Boys who let a dare rise too hot and bled each other a little are set side by side at the quern for a week. Flour dust works into their eyebrows, and friendships from such duty have a habit of curing sturdily. A biting word at table earns a labour debt in haying season, where the insulted person can be observed judging fairly. If they do, the insult shrinks to a joke by Lammas. Truth is maintained not only by law but by craft. A tally stick is split its full length so each partner keeps one half. Notches cut together will match only their twin. No forgery can replicate the grain. Weighing is done with the same set of stones in public view, the scale arm level with a finger laid lightly, not pressing. When cloth is measured, the L-stick is passed around to show its marks haven't crept. Children absorb this without speeches. The way their mother refuses a lighter jar because it was filled with a wet scoop. The way their father adds an extra handful when the measure came up scant because the other man's pride is worth more than a tight fist of barley. The memory of such choices is the real ledger. Sacred time leans on the same furniture as ordinary time. It just asks for a cleaner floor and more lamps. Yule approaches, and the house begins a series of small preparations. A careful sweep in places nobody thinks to sweep in summer. A polish of metal that catches firelight as if to double it. A laying aside of better cuts of meat. Sprigs of evergreen show up where hands will brush them and remember living colour. At the turn itself, fires are fed with a confidence that winter cannot argue with. Stories are told of those who are gone, not to pin them in place but to warm the edges of the living with their shapes. Bread is marked with a sign, cross or hammer or both, with the easy, practical piety of people who would rather bless than boast. In spring, first fat lambs bring first fat laughter, and a portion is set aside not for appetite but for gratitude, placed where birds can find it or buried at the boundary stone. In harvest, a sheaf stands last and honoured until it becomes food for animals with a name, because gratitude tastes better when everyone in the household can share it. Prophecy exists here, but not as a circus. A wise woman may visit, staff in hand, eyes more interested in patterns than in performance. She sits by the door where the draught is sharp and the thoughts stay cool. People ask less about fate than about timing. When should we launch? Will the herd take the hill or the valley better this year? Her answers have the shape of possibilities, not commands. The cost for her counsel is meat and cloth, and a promise to listen. Lots are cast in quiet corners, bits of wood or bone marked and shaken, not to build a prison of destiny, but to push a hesitant mind off the fence where it has stalled too long. Dreams are told at breakfast without anyone reaching for a book. If an elder nods slowly, that is enough to warrant a day's extra caution with axes or boats. Guests do more than change the air, they tune the house's ethics. A wealthy trader sleeping by your fire is a test of your fairness. A poor wanderer is a test of your generosity. For the first, you protect his goods with a visible lack of interest and keep your offers clean. For the second, you find him work that preserves his face and pays in food and dignity. No one who leaves the door should be able to tell a story that would make your ancestors cringe. Even enemies, if they cross the threshold with empty hands spread, must be fed. The old rule is unromantic and absolute. No one stabs under a roof. If that rule breaks, the wood remembers, and the wood tells, and the valley will know before the week ends. It is not piety. It is technology that keeps violence outdoors where the sky can dilute it and the law can see. Gifts have a grammar. The object is smaller than the meaning. A knife with a sound edge given to someone who has admired it twice averts envy and increases safety at the same time. A length of good cloth sent to a house where a birth is near speaks a kind of blessing that cannot be misread. To refuse a gift is to pick a quarrel. To give without thought of the tie it creates is to be a fool. The balance is learned young. Take, but take with intention. Give, but give in a way that can be carried and used and remembered every time it saves a minute or a finger. Stories conduct lore and belief across years like copper conducts heat. When light winds out and the last lamp wick is pinched low, the teller stands in the story lane and begins. Some tales are old as oaks. How a god lost a hammer and found it again. How a saint walked across black water. How a woman tricked a troll by naming it and then naming a price for her secret. Others are young and sharp. How Gunnar the miller miscounted on purpose once and had to grind house grain for a winter without pay while his neighbours ate bread that tasted like justice. Children learn the vector of right behaviour by laughing at those who skidded sideways. Adults are reminded that they are not new. The ritual is not dusty. It is maintenance, like sharpening a knife. The edge needs attention even when the blade looks fine. When weather pens the valley in and tempers shorten with the days, you see the value of a house that believes in something beyond itself. A quarrel is postponed because it's a saint's day, or because the winter night blot is near and no one wants to sour the hearth with hot words. A judgment is accepted because too many eyes saw the oath spoken cleanly. A risk is taken because a dream showed a bright path, and because the old woman who almost never speaks suddenly said, "Go." A ship launches with a carved sign fixed at the prow, and a basket of bread set down at the water's edge for the tide to decide what to do with. You could call these gestures superstition. The people who make them would call them cords, thin, strong cords that tie humans to each other and to weather, to ancestors and to children not yet born, so that when the sea remembers its power or the field forgets its promise, the house does not come apart. At the edge of everything sits death, and the house treats it like a guest it must honour even when it would rather not. The body is washed with water that has been heated attentively, dressed in the best a life can provide. Wool combed smooth, brooches polished, a knife that was faithful set where a hand would find it in the dark. Words are said that grew up in this very room. Sometimes a priest's Latin joins them, sometimes only a murmur of names and thanks before the lid goes on. Burial follows the customs of the place and the era, a mound raised in a curve that holds a boat's idea, or a place in a churchyard where soil sees many such returns. The living come home to a quieter fire and a table with one bowl fewer. The next morning the chores begin on time. That too is belief and law and hospitality. To meet grief by keeping the promises you made to animals, land, and one another. In the end, the roof asks for only one kind of faith, that people can share heat without stealing it, truth without breaking it, food without counting mouthfuls out loud, and justice without forgetting mercy. The rest is detail, beautiful, storied, worth remembering, but still detail. A drop on the coals, a ring warmed by flame, a guest set down with a full bowl and an empty question. That is the daily liturgy. The Longhouse keeps the pattern and, in doing so, keeps the people. The fire burns, the rafters listen. The door opens to the weather and to the world, and closes each night on a covenant everyone in the room understands.